Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. In this episode of 10 Questions, we do Middle Kingdom Egypt. Stuck in the middle with you. United Egypt into the Middle Kingdom. We start with that question because when we left our last episode on the Old Kingdom, Egypt was divided. It was broken up into pieces. The Old Kingdom had faded away. There had been a pharaoh who died, natural causes, and there was no successor. And nobody cared because Pharaoh wasn't doing the job of Pharaoh anymore. Pharaoh wasn't leading the government anymore. Pharaoh, in the end, wasn't helping the people in the way, say, Khufu had been doing. The nobility had picked up that job. Pharaohs had become builders-in-chief, and so they diverted money to their local noblemen and asked them to pick up the slack and do the government, and noblemen were happy to do it, but what that inadvertently did was take legitimacy away from the pharaoh and give it to the nobility. The nobility weren't trying to overthrow the pharaoh. They were actually the pharaoh's homeboys. They were perfectly fine working with the pharaoh. It's that the legitimacy has to go somewhere. The idea that who is going to fix the problems? Who is going to run the show? Who has the right to tell you what to do? There's always somebody. Even for pharaohs, they have a relationship to the gods. So even kings who say, I'm an absolutist king, there's still God up there. Hi. God still can tell you what to do. So everybody answers to somebody. So legitimacy just diverts like energy. First law of thermodynamics. Energy, like legitimacy, cannot be destroyed. It can only be converted. It can only be diverted into another form. Somebody's going to have it. So the nobility gain it. So when the pharaoh dies, Egypt continues on like a ship with its engines turned off. But what the nobility realized was without a pharaoh, anybody could be pharaoh. And if anybody could be pharaoh, and pharaoh is the greatest job that humans have ever made, why couldn't they be pharaoh? Right? And so then you have this century of the intermediate period, this century of warfare, where nobles fight with each other over who's going to get to be pharaoh. And it's not always violence. Sometimes it's just mean Uno games. But every interaction these nobilities has with each other, with other noblemen, every meeting, every dinner, every wedding they go to, every funeral they go to, they're always like shaking each other's hands really hard to see who's in charge. It's all of this kind of competition. And then there's the violence on top of it, the gang warfare, like we talked about with early kings. A nobleman with his homeboys gets together and beats up another nobleman. And if they can, they murder him, or they knock him out, or they take over his little province and they absorb that. Well, if you continue that process, either the kingdom is completely divided and never comes back together, or it must reunite. And Egypt reunites to form the Middle Kingdom. So who did that? And the answer is the princes of Thebes. Who are the princes of Thebes? Thebes is the southernmost city. So the princes of Thebes are the people who own the province that's connected to African trade. So they have an economic advantage. They are one of the only two areas with international connections. There's Thebes in the south, where the first cataract is. That connects up the river, up the Nile to Africa. And then there's the Delta, where ships from Phoenicia or Greece can come in and trade. Everybody in the middle has no interaction with anybody who isn't Egyptian. So the Thebans, the princes of Thebes, have an economic advantage. Because African trade is coming into Egypt, Egyptian trade is going into Africa, and they're able to tax it. It's in their province, it's in their town, so they're able to tax the sales tax on things that are bought and sold. So they take that tax, and they turn to the African merchants and they say, can you hire us some mercenaries? You Africans fight all the time. You know how to fight. You're good at it. Can we hire some? And the merchants say, sure. They're expensive, though, because they're very good at their job. Are you sure you can afford it? And the prince of the thieves says, yeah, because I'm got access to all this trade, sales tax. So here's what I've got. Send me what I can afford. So they're able to turn that economic advantage, that economic access, into a military advantage. And that allows them to defeat the other noble houses to the south and create the Middle Kingdom. What effect that has is that it then adds African cultural connection to Egypt. By bringing in these African mercenaries, not only do you bring in their military style, but you bring in their culture, you bring in their ideas, you bring in their language, you bring in their food, you bring in their clothes, you bring in their way of thinking. Because people bring with them their culture, people bring with them their way of behaving. Now, the African mercenaries are not going to stay. They're going to be sent home, they're going to be paid off very well, and they're going to be sent back up the river to Kush and Meroe, to Central Africa, East Africa. But their culture, their ideas, their food stays behind. And so the point is that there's going to always now be this connection. Remember when we started, we said Egypt is in Africa, but it's not African? Now, starting to see more cultural connections between Egypt and Africa up the Nile. You want to remember that, because when we get to the end of the New Kingdom, it's going to come back. It's going to be a big point. So, did the Middle Kingdom pharaohs build pyramids? Did they? The answer is no, they didn't. Why didn't they? Pyramids worked for the Old Kingdom for 1,000 years. Old Kingdom pharaohs built pyramids. So, why didn't Middle Kingdom pharaohs do it? Well, because in the end it didn't work. It worked for a while. It worked for Khufu. It worked for Khufu's sons. It worked for the ancestors of Khufu who came before him. But it didn't work in the end. In the end, it was extremely expensive, it was time-consuming, and it didn't help the pharaohs in Egypt, control Egypt. It didn't help the pharaohs accomplish their legitimacy. So it worked for a while, and then it stopped working. So since it stopped working, why go back to it? Why try to do something that didn't work? Sure, you could be nostalgic for when it did work, but it didn't work in the end. So the Middle Kingdom is going to have to change. It's not the Old Kingdom Part 2. It's something new. And so then what's going to be the answer? What is this new form of legitimacy? And the answer that they come up with is twofold. The answer they come up with is twofold. The answer they come up with is twofold. The first, the early method of legitimacy. Is infrastructure. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs want to make people's lives better. That's where legitimacy lies. That's how the Old Kingdom pharaohs did it. The Old Kingdom pharaohs had a contract. They hired you, and they paid you well. You built something for Pharaoh. He paid you good money. Now, not only did you build it, right? Not only did you get paid money, but you got ancillary things out of the pyramids too. So you got time away from your family. You got time to hang out with the other guys. You got time to hang out with the boys, right? This is men doing manly stuff, right? But you also came home 3 months later after working in the hot sun, doing manual labor, looking sexy, looking built, looking fit and tan. So the wives were kind of happy. Their husbands came home with money that the husbands could spend on them, and they looked sexy, and they looked tan. Whew, that is awesome. Middle Kingdom pharaohs are not going to do a direct payment. They're not going to just give money to the people. So their answer to this is infrastructure. We're going to build canals, drainage, levees, dikes. We're going to help farmers get the thing they need. And the thing that they need is water. Farmers always, always, always need water. Better water, easier water. So even though the Nile is the Nile, as Egypt expands, as the population develops, as more land is put under cultivation, you need canals, you need drainage for the floods, you need levees, you need dikes, you need ways of protecting and moving water. Second thing they do is dredge the Nile. The Nile may be the greatest river in the ancient world, but sandbars build up. There's silt that builds up. And so the need to have a clearer Nile, a deeper Nile that ships can more easily navigate, especially more heavily laden ships. The more stuff you put on the ship, the deeper it sinks into the water. So if you want to trade like a lot of stuff, you need a bigger ship that sinks lower, that sits lower in the water. So you need to dredge the Nile so that it won't run aground in the middle of the river. So dredging the Nile creates easier trade. Finally, the third thing is mines in the Sinai. What this does is help make Egypt less reliant on foreigners, especially the Hittites, for mineral wealth. What this also accomplished is, if you develop gold mines, that means the pharaoh needs less taxes. The pharaoh has more money coming in gold. It's not exactly free money because it costs money to mine, to pay the miners, right? But you get the money in its kind of purest form. You melt it down, you turn it into coins, and boom, you need less taxes because you can now pay people in this gold. So that helps people because they pay less taxes. And nobody in history really likes paying taxes. They always complain about taxes. They like what taxes give them, but they always are going to complain about taxes. They just always do. And so anything that helps citizens pay less taxes, they're happy about. What's the problem with this? So infrastructure, mines. What's the problem? Dredging the Nile? Well, none of it is sexy. It all takes a long time. And no one cares after a while. Like, just nobody cares. They either forget what used to not exist. Like, once you use the bridge, you kind of forget that the bridge didn't exist. And the second thing is, after a while, you forget who's responsible for it in the first place. Take, for example, the Walt Whitman Bridge. It opened in 1957. Nobody listening to this video, nobody listening to this podcast, is going to remember a time before the Walt Whitman Bridge was built. You, your parents, maybe even your grandparents, may not even remember a time when there wasn't a Walt Whitman Bridge. So do you care that the Democrats built it in the mid-1950s? Are you voting Democrat today because, that was the party that built the Walt Whitman Bridge? No, you don't care. It's always been there. So who cares? The best example for you who local is in Camden County is the 130-42-295 interchange. In 2008, after the economy collapsed, one of the ways that the federal government decided they were going to help people get back to work was infrastructure. We're going to build roads. We're going to build bridges. We're going to fix things, right? And it's always popular. People always love this stuff, right? Obama has an infrastructure package. Biden has an infrastructure package. Trump could have had an infrastructure package. There was politics involved. There was the border wall involved, but they couldn't negotiate one. The Democrats wanted to have one. Trump wanted to have one. It just didn't work out. The point is that everyone can have an infrastructure package. Everybody likes building stuff that makes people's lives a little easier. And so Obama got the Congress to have an infrastructure package, and money flowed out to Camden County. Now, I moved down here in 2007 from New York, and I got to tell you, that 130-42-295 interchange was scary. It was like 4 roads. It was like 8 lanes, 10 lanes, all coming together. It was scary. I was driving it, and I'm like, this has to change. This is dangerous. And so I applauded. I was like, this is great. Right? Well, they're still working on it. They still haven't finished it. There's still interchanges going up. An entire retaining wall fell apart years ago, and they still haven't fixed that. Right? For some of you, you weren't even 5 years old. You may not have any memory of anything but traffic and construction at the interchange. Your entire life may be just memories of sitting in traffic where 42 and 295 come together with all the construction and not realizing that, one, that construction hadn't been there, and two, what the road used to be like. That's it. That's the thing. And are you like voting Obama? Am I voting Obama because of infrastructure in 2008 that's still not complete? No. You don't know that's where the money came from. You don't care. And that's okay. That's the problem with infrastructure. You get a short burst of people being happy when it's made. And then time goes on. And people stop caring. So you're going to need a new method of legitimacy. What the Middle Kingdom pharaohs figure out pretty quickly is we're going to need a new method of legitimacy. So what is the later method of legitimacy? And the answer is art, cultural creation, stories, poems, plays. They send the circus to town, like in Dumbo or Aladdin. They send it to every little town, every little rural town. And they put on these shows for free. They bring out the peacocks and the jugglers and the fire breathers. And they bring out the artists and they set up a stage. If any of you saw the musical with Hugh Jackman, The Greatest Show, right? The Greatest Showman, right? And the beginning with that song. Whoa, whoa, boom, boom. Whoa, whoa. Right? It's the show. You want to go to the show. And what is the show going to tell you? What is the show going to do? Tell you how great Pharaoh is. Is it propaganda? Yes. But is it also art? Yes. So, what is the advantage of this? Why do it? And the answer is, it's cheap. Poets, playwrights, contractors, stages, costumes, that's all cheap compared to pyramids and infrastructure. Pyramids, 50,000 people who had to eat for 3 months, is expensive. A bunch of poets, Shakespeare tells us they're a dime a dozen. They don't want to be farmers. So they're, hey, Hey, I get to act on stage? I don't have to be a farmer and you're going to pay me to act or you're going to pay me to write stories? Hell, yeah, I'm going to do that. It touches a lot of people. Why? Because everybody wants to go and see these plays. Why? It's the most important thing that's happened all year. It's the most exciting thing. Can you imagine that you're living in this rural town where everybody's a farmer, nothing ever happens, and then the jugglers come, the mummers come, giant elephants come, they set up a giant stage in the town square? Like, it's the coolest thing that's going to happen. Everybody's going to want to go. Every teenage girl is going to want to go because it's the most interesting thing to happen. There's no club. There's no sororities. There's nothing else going on that's fun. That's dumb. That's just there for teenagers. This is there. So every teenage girl is going to want to go. And that means every teenage boy is going to want to go. And if every teenage girl goes and every teenage boy goes, that means the parents have to go. Because even though it's 4,000 years ago, parents understood teenagers need time alone. But not too much time alone. Not too much time and not too much alone. So you set up the seats. The teenagers sit near the front, in the middle, right? The parents are in the back because they notice they have to sit behind the teenagers so they can watch the teenagers, make sure their hands stay where they're supposed to stay. And they have a good time, and the teenagers have a good time, and the little kids go because can't leave them at home. So the little kids come in, they sit in the front row, they sit on the dirt in front of the stage. They're right up front, right? So everybody goes. And they all have a good time. And not only does everybody go, but the merchants come out. This is a big deal. This is a party. So the merchants come out. Food, drinks, beer, crafts. Hey, there's a scene where the actors ring a bell to announce the coming of the Pharaoh, right? So you're going to have a craftsman set up a booth and sells bells to the kids. Hey, kids, you want to ring a bell when the Pharaoh comes? And they go, yeah, Mommy, can I? And the parent goes, yeah, sure. How much is it? It's 2 sovereigns. Fine, here's 2 sovereigns. Great, let's go get popcorn. Right? So you get merchants that show up to make a buck. And they sell something, and it's part of being part of the show. So not only is there the show, there's the environment, the market, there's the show around the show. So it's the most interesting week of the year. So what do they perform? What do they put on? They put on shows about how the Pharaoh has power to help and care for the people. He helps young lovers get married. See, because they'll have young lovers. They're neighbors. There's the boy and the girl. And they make googly eyes at each other, right? But their parents aren't, their parents are like, they're the neighbor kid. I don't know, very Montague and Capulet, but and then something happens, right? The girl goes to work as a maid in another family's house where the elder son kind of creeps on her, right? And the boy gets like kidnapped by pirates or something. There has to be something in the middle that keeps them apart, right? If you watch The Princess Bride, you know this. And then how is the play going to end? What's going to happen? Our young lovers? What's going to happen? Pharaoh will show up and help them get married. He will solve the problem. He will defeat the pirates. Send a creepy boy from the creepy family, on assignment to Libya, and he will get them together and he'll say, you two are made for each other. I marry you. And then the parents have to get along. They can't object because Pharaoh is awesome. And actually, the parents realize that their kids are in love, and boom, and they have a giant ceremony and a giant wedding put on by Pharaoh, and everybody ends up happy and dancing at the end. This is very Bollywood. He saves animals from the flood. Right? The flood happens. He's there helping saving animals. Cute kid in here, an otter there. He's got a puppy on his head, right? He's saving animals from the flood. Who doesn't love a pharaoh who saves animals from the flood? Who? Pharaoh buries heroic poor people. So a poor person dies, saving 3 children and a puppy from a house fire. But he's so poor, his family can't bury him. Who hears about this heroism? Pharaoh hears about it. And does Pharaoh care? Yes. And not only will Pharaoh help bury this person, Pharaoh is going to make sure he's honored. He goes to the gods. He gets into the afterlife like the hero that he is. So when you leave these plays that are put on by Pharaoh, the MC comes out on the stage and says, these plays are put on by a generous donation from Pharaoh. And everyone claps. Yay, Pharaoh. And then they watch this. What do you think the little kids do when they end? They leave going, I'm going to play Pharaoh. You play the animal who gets saved. I'm going to save you. And you play the heroic dead guy. I'm going to bury you. Right? I'm going to be a Pharaoh. No, I'm going to be Pharaoh. No, I'm going to be Pharaoh. No, we can't all be Pharaoh. There's only one Pharaoh. Right? It's like the little kids coming out of the Matrix. Everybody wanted to be Neo doing Kung Fu. That's soft power. People who have never met Pharaoh like Pharaoh. They have a good impression of him or her. So this is great. It's cheap. It touches a lot of people. And they all leave happy. They're happy with Pharaoh. How could this be bad? What's the problem with this? How can this be a problem? Well, you know it's a problem. You just don't know it's a problem. But you know in your life this is a problem because you have an Instagram account. You have a Facebook account. Maybe you're on Twitter. Maybe you're on a half a dozen other social media places. And you know this is a problem because you know the problem is you can post something that you think says something about you. Your grandma sees it. Or your auntie sees it. Or, even worse, your boss sees it. And what you think is something cute turns into something else. Because you cannot determine how someone else interprets your story, your message. I'll give you a good one. I'll give you one, a personal one from my life. When I was in college, I went to sleepaway college. I went to college where you lived at college. And the weekends were full of partying. Partying. Even underage, for fraternity, sorority, lots of partying, lots of drinking. So you'd be walking around on campus and you would notice in the windows empty bottles of all kinds of things. Empty scotch, empty Jack Daniels, empty vodka. Maybe some people, the more artistic types, fill them with colored sand. So you get like, it'd be Tito's, well, it wasn't Tito's back then. It'd be Absolute Vodka, right? But in Absolute Vodka, you'd have this rainbow leveling of sand, right? They made art out of it. You'd see window after window after window with all these empty bottles, right? What do you think happened to those bottles during Parents' Weekend? Those bottles were symbols of adulthood. Those bottles were symbols of a good time, of stamina, of like, look at what I can do. And then they're symbols of art, of turning something pretty, the empty bottle, into something artistic, right? And then Mom and Dad and Grandma came by. What do you think happened? You know what happened. All those bottles disappeared. Row after row, window after window that had all this empty alcohol bottle art, all disappeared. All disappeared. Into closets, into footlockers. All disappeared. Hey, friend, neighbor, you want this? I don't need it anymore. Oh, wow, that's really nice. Why are you getting rid of it? Just reasons. But you got to decide by like Saturday morning. Because the answer was Mom, Dad, or Grandma was going to look at that empty beer bottle, that empty vodka bottle, that empty scotch bottle, that empty Jack Daniels, and they weren't going to see independent fun and art and artistic expression. They were going to see a drunken slob of a child. They were going to take the same item and have a completely different interpretation of what it meant. And that happened to the Middle Kingdom. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? You can't control that. You can't control who hears your stories. You can't determine how they're going to interpret it. Right? You do not want me to be on your Instagram feed, right? I don't want to be on your Instagram feed. Why? Because I know you as a student. I don't need to know you in any other way. And when I see you posting a picture, or more likely, I click on one of your, if I'm following you on Instagram, I click on someone you follow, one of your friends, and they have a picture of you downing a bottle of Jack Daniels, right? And I see that, and the next day, Oh, look, I get an email. Professor, I need an extension. My grandmother died. I can't do the test today. What do I know? Do I know you're a good, honest person, or do I have evidence to the contrary, right? And now what do I think about you? Not that you were having a good time, that you're a young person, that you were with friends, that you're a good friend. No, 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 no. None of the things that your friend thought of when they posted the picture, or you thought of when you let them take the picture, or maybe you didn't even know they took the picture. Again, you can't determine who tells your story. So stories that Egyptians hear one way, other people, say Mesopotamian pirates, hear another. Here, I'll give you an example. Pharaoh is so popular, he doesn't even need an army to protect his immense wealth. He's got trillions of dollars, no army. That's how much Egyptians love him. Well, if you're an Egyptian, you hear, good Pharaoh, very popular, love the guy. If you're a Mesopotamian pirate, you hear, lots of money, easy to take. So what happens? What ends the Middle Kingdom? Exactly this. Mesopotamian pirates hear those stories and invade over the Sinai into the delta with their chariots and their horses, and in fire and blood lay waste to northern Egypt. And this is a trauma. The Egyptians have no tradition of war. They don't know what horses are. They don't know what chariots are. They don't know what the wheel is. Egyptians don't need a wheel. They have the Nile. You want to travel somewhere, you don't take a road, you take the Nile. Everybody in Egypt lives within 10 miles of the Nile banks. Probably much closer than that. Probably within 3 miles tops. You don't need wheels. You ship everything by river. And so in come these heavy metal barbarians from Mesopotamia who live in a tough neighborhood. There's chariots, there's war, there's death, there's destruction, there's nomads, right? The Egyptians don't have to worry about nomads, they have deserts. But if you live anywhere in Mesopotamia, you've got craziness all the time. You've got chaos. And then this comes rolling out of the desert. You didn't know that was happening. And it is a trauma. How could this happen to us? What did we do to deserve this? How do we stop it from ever happening again? It is a violent, destructive trauma to the soul of Egypt. The Pharaoh goes down fighting. Much of his nobility goes down fighting. All in the north, anyway, right? They're not bad guys. They're not bad leaders. They're trying to protect Egypt, but they're completely behind the eight ball. They can't do it. They don't have the technology. They don't have the traditions. They don't have the culture, right? They play folk music. They are James Taylor, Carole King. The Hyksos are heavy metal, but not even like my 1980s hair metal, like Iron Maiden or Metallica. No, they're like Gwar. They're like Sabaton. They are heavy metal that even heavy metal people go, wow, that's heavy. That's the Hyksos. Now, we don't know who they are. We know they're from Mesopotamia, but we don't know which people they are. We don't know where they came from. Now, they crossed the Sinai, which is a desert, which means they must have had a fleet. They must have had ships because you need water. And the only thing that can carry enough water is there are no backpacks. You couldn't carry it on, like a camelback. You couldn't do that. So you need to put water in barrels. The only thing that can carry enough barrels to have enough water for people to drink is a ship. So you needed lots of ships. The only people who had lots of ships are the Phoenicians. So there had to be some kind of alliance with some Phoenician cities. So the Hyksos may have come from Phoenicia. They may have come from north of that, from Syria. We don't really know, but they are Mesopotamian. They come from a tough neighborhood, and they roll in like thunder. So then what did Egypt need? The northern half of Egypt is looted, laid waste. Anything that's worth taking has been taken. Anything that was worth money has been stolen. Animals are being eaten. Land is being destroyed. Men are being murdered. Terrible things are happening. And the Hyksos are drunk, hanging out, like a biker gang having taken over a town in like a movie in the 40s, right? So what does Egypt need? Well, like Gotham, Egypt needs a hero. Egypt needs somebody who can unify the nobility. Because everybody thinks I will be the guy who kicks out the Hyksos. Well, most of you aren't. Most of you just don't have what it takes. You don't have the charisma. You don't have the intelligence. You don't have the stamina. You can't do it. Most people just can't be Superman or Batman. How many Supermans are there? There's one. That's two because of Supergirl. How many Batmans are there? There's one. Right? Even Robin's like, I could be Batman. And Batman's like, yeah, no, you can't. You need someone who can build an army to defeat the Hyksos. From where? With what technology? With what knowledge? So you need someone who's able to do that. To build something that Egypt has never had before. And then you need someone who's able to motivate the people to stop future invasions. At the very least, that's to pay a lot of taxes. But it's probably you're going to have to change the culture. You're going to have to change the society. You're going to have to change them from folk music to heavy metal. How do you do that? Well, who can do that? Amos is the guy who does that. Who is Amos? Amos is the hero. Amos is able to do those three things. He's able to wrangle the other nobility to support him, to put him in charge. He's able to build an army. And we'll talk about that when we do the New Kingdom. He's able to convince people to create a new model for what legitimacy is, for what Egypt is, for what being an Egyptian is. Why Amos? Well, he's Amos. What am I going to tell you? He had it. He's it. But here's the thing. He does not rebuild the Middle Kingdom. He does not make Middle Kingdom Part 2. He does not portray himself. I can't say he doesn't portray himself because his artwork does. But he doesn't think of himself as a Middle Kingdom king. He's going to be something new. The Middle Kingdom is dead. The Middle Kingdom is over. He's not so much the savior of the Middle Kingdom as the builder of what becomes the New Kingdom. Why? Because the trauma of the powerlessness of the Middle Kingdom ends the Middle Kingdom. Psychologically, people don't want the Middle Kingdom. They want something new. And the violence and looting of the Hyksos forces Amos to create something new, to create new systems, to create new taxes, to create new everything in order to try to placate that trauma. The idea is this can never happen again. And the Middle Kingdom allowed it to happen. So the Middle Kingdom is over. Not only physically, but in the hearts and minds of people. Now, we're going to talk about this kind of when we do other empires. The Roman Empire, for example. The Roman Empire is more of an idea by 400 than it is a physical thing. Certainly by 500. And the death of the Roman Empire is not 476, it's over. It slowly dies in the minds of people that Rome will never come back again. There will never be a great Roman emperor in Rome the way there had been. At best, we get a Byzantine, a Greek-speaking pretender. Or, worse, we get a Charlemagne, a barbarian from the north. a Germanic barbarian who takes a title of Roman emperor, of Christian Roman emperor. But is he? He's not Constantine. He's not Augustus. He's certainly not Trajan or Hadrian. And so the idea just dies. It dies in the minds and the hearts of people. That's the Middle Kingdom. So Amos not only buries the Middle Kingdom, but like a phoenix creates the New Kingdom. That's what we're going to talk about next. Thank you very much, everybody. Be safe. Take care.